Conditions for parallelograms. So we've talked about the properties of parallelograms. What we want to be able to do after today is to determine if a quadrilateral is a parallelogram given a set of properties. So before we were given that it was a parallelogram and we said, okay, then we know that these two angles are congruent, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go the other way around, or what we would say is the converse. So we're going to give you some things, and then if those things are true, then we know it's a parallelogram. So based on what we talked about the other day, if any one of these things is true, then we have a parallelogram. We know that both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. If that was true, we had a parallelogram. If both pairs of opposite sides are parallel, we have a parallelogram. If a pair of opposite sides is both congruent and parallel, if the diagonals bisect each other, if both pairs of opposite angles are congruent, and then finally, one angle is supplementary to both of its consecutive sides, or consecutive angles rather. So if any of those things are true, then we have a parallelogram. So based on what we have here, determine if each quadrilateral is a parallelogram and then justify your answer. So right now we have opposite sides are congruent, and we have opposite angles, because these angles would have to be the same then as well. Opposite angles are congruent. So let's see if we have that anywhere. So a pair of opposite sides is both congruent and parallel. Diagonals bisect each other. Okay, so what do we have going on? Well, we know that opposite angles are congruent. So we have one set of opposite angles are congruent. We have one set of sides congruent. We know that if we had to prove that these two triangles were congruent, we could use this middle side and call it angle side angle, which would then tell us that these two sides are also equal to each other. So we would be able to say, okay, we have two pairs of opposite sides are congruent, and we would then be able to say that these two angles are congruent, so then we have it. But if we just have one pair of, or just one set of opposite sides congruent and one set of opposite angles, that's not enough. We don't have that anymore. We need both of those. So that would not work if we had that. But this one does work based on if we prove those triangles are congruent first and then go from there. Number two, we can see what happened here. These lines bisected each other. So let's see if that happens and if that makes parallelogram. Well, in number four, we see diagonals bisect each other. Okay, so that would be our reason. We do have a parallelogram. So we have yes by number 4 in this case. And I'm not going to quiz you 1 through 6 which one's which. You just want to make sure you can refer back to them. Number 3, we're looking for, okay, one angle is supplementary to both of its consecutive angles. Does that one work here? Well, we know this is 70 degrees. We know this is 100 degrees. Okay, well that definitely doesn't work. These do not add up to 180, so that does not work. Let's test you on some parallelogram stuff. So, determine if each statement is true or false. If false, find a counterexample. So we could draw a picture if we need to. If the opposite angles in a quadrilateral are congruent. So if we know the opposite angles in a quadrilateral are congruent, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Okay. Well, we know from above, if the opposite angles in a quadrilateral are congruent, then we should have a parallelogram. I don't know if we could come up with some sort of counterexample to prove this is false. In 5, if two sides of a quadrilateral are congruent, so we have those two sides so far, are congruent, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Well, maybe, but what if we had something like this? Or it's kind of a trapezoid. If we looked at it like this, and we had these two sides could be congruent to each other. Something like this. Now it doesn't look perfect, but you can see that that's not a parallelogram because those sides are not going to be parallel to each other. Parallelogram has the word parallel, and that's what you require. So that would not work. That would be false. First one was true. I don't know if I ever wrote that down. We talked about it, but it didn't write it. Last one, if a diagonal and the sides of the quadrilateral swim, so we have SWIM, form two congruent triangles. So using this, they form two congruent triangles. Then swim is a parallelogram. Well, think about everything you know about congruent triangles. You know, again, this is used angle side angle. We would know that this is congruent. I don't want to mark it like that. This is congruent to this. This is congruent to this. Already we have a parallelogram because we have two pairs of opposite sides congruent. So true, two pairs of opposite sides are congruent. Okay? Let's get into a little bit more math. Use parallelogram math, speaking of, and the given information to find each value. MHT is 73. See if I can mark this correctly. MHT is 73 degrees. Find HTA. Well, HTA is down here, so we'll look at it like this. We know that those two angles together should add up to 180. So 180 minus 73, that's going to be 107 degrees. So measure of, let's rewrite that. Measure of angle HTA is 107 degrees. I'm going to erase just so that we can look at some different stuff for number 8. We know that MA is 11. We know that AT is 15. We know that AMH is 101 degrees. We want to find HT. Well, so far, we're given a couple pieces of information that we will like and we need. Actually, we're really just given one. If we want to know what HT is, we know it's the same as MA. MA is 11. HT is 11. So pretty simple. I'm going to erase again and set up one last problem. Actually, I guess I have two more down there. If MTH is 7x minus 11, so M to T to H, or I'm sorry, MH, what am I looking at? MH is 7x minus 11, and AT is 3x plus 5. Well, again, given it's a parallelogram, we know that these two are congruent to each other. So set up and solve for x. I will give you guys a couple seconds to get it started, maybe pause it, and then work through this one with me. Okay, so we have 7x minus 11 should be equal to 3x plus 5. What x would make that happen? So we have 3x over here. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to add 11 back. 4x equals 16, so x equals 4. Didn't have to plug it back in. And the last one, I'm going to zoom out just for labeling purposes here. MAT, HESON is my last name, no, just kidding. MAT is 9x plus 11, and ATH is 6x plus 4. And notice how I mark those being not congruent each time. That kind of gives me a clue as to what I'm doing. I want to find the measure of MAT. Well, the only way I can find the measure of MAT is if I know x. Well, we know that these two angles are consecutive angles. Consecutive angles create supplementary angles. In other words, they add up to 180. So we're going to set up 9x plus 11 plus 6x plus 4 equals 180. So we have 15x plus 15 equals 180. So we have 15x equals 165. Divide by 15. We get x is 11. Now, we want to know what the measure of angle MAT is, so we have to plug that back in. That came from MAT is represented by 9x plus 11. So all we're going to do is say 9 times 11 plus 11, so that's 99 plus 11. Measure of angle MAT equals 110 degrees. And again, as I do these problems, always feel free to pause, work ahead, and then kind of come back and see how you do. You can even fast forward to see how you're doing on each problem. Okay, a couple more. I'm going to zoom back in so you guys can see a little bit better. What values must x and y have so that the quadrilateral is a parallelogram? So again, we know we're looking for this. Over here, we're looking for this. It's important that you are able to mark those things. That makes the problem way easier. You know what to set equal, you know where to go. It just makes the problem much, much easier. So here we know we're going to set up 2x plus y equals 6. And we have 4x plus y equals 8. Now again, you're going to get good at seeing these systems kind of form, and that's why I put them right on top of each other to begin with. So we have x and y in both. It's a system. Okay, so I'm going to multiply the top one, or I'll multiply the bottom one by -1. So I'm going to rewrite everything as 2x plus y equals 6 over -4x minus y equals -8. So pretty simple one to get rid of these y's here. Cancels here. We have -2x equals -2. X is 1. Okay. Now, to figure out what x is or what y is going to be, you can plug it into either one. Doesn't matter which one you plug it into. I will plug it into, let's see, I'll plug it into 2x plus y equals 6. So 2 times 1 plus y equals 6. 2 plus y equals 6, showing step by step just the way it should be done. Y is equal to 4. Okay, same kind of idea on number 12. Separate this. We have x plus y needs to be equal to 20, and 2x needs to be equal to 24. Notice how I don't have to have a system because I can find x right away. Divide by 2, x is 12. And over here, we're not going to use that and say 12 plus y equals 20. Y is 8. So 12 and 8. Simple as that. Last problem on here. Determine whether or not math is a parallelogram given this set of vertices. Again, we want to know if it's a parallelogram. So what do you think we are looking for? Well, if it's parallel, two sides are parallel, two sets of sides are parallel, then it's a parallelogram. So we're looking for this kind of thing. This should be parallel to this. This should be parallel to this. If we have those, then we're good to go. So that's all we're looking for. Do we have two sets of parallel sides? Which means we're just finding slope. So we need to do 4 different slopes. So we'll say that this is M, A, T, H. I'm going to do the first 2. I'll have you guys do the last 2. So pause again, work ahead, make sure you know how to find a slope. So MA is going to be equal to 11 minus 5, y2 minus y1, over 6 minus 6. Okay, again, if you're using jumps, that's the same kind of idea. So that's going to be equal to 6 over 0. Never divide by 0. That would be an undefined or a vertical slope. Okay, moving on. So this is undefined up here. Let's see. We know that AT is going to be our next one. If you want to go in that order, it doesn't matter, I suppose. 18 minus 11 over 14 minus 6. So we have 7 over 8, which is going to be just left as 7 over 8. Find the next 2. So you need to find TH and MH would be the last one. So we know this is 7/8. If we get undefined and 7/8 again, we have a parallelogram. If we don't, not a parallelogram. So find the next two, decide what we have here. Make sure you have that done for tomorrow. I will check that. I'll let you guys talk about it at the beginning of class. See ya.